In the heart of Nigeria, where ancient traditions entwine with the breath of modernity, where red soil kissed the soles of wandering feet and the golden sun bathed the emerald hills of the east, a tale was destined to unfold. It was a story not written in books or sung in the moonlit nights of the griot's songs. No, this story was woven by fate itself. It began in the modest village of Umuse, where a humble young man would dare to fall in love with a woman born not only of royalty, but of impossible dreams. Obinna was the son of a fisherman. He was tall and lean, with eyes as deep as the river Niger, and a smile that could make the mango trees sway in joy. Though his family had little, Obinna had something rare, a heart filled with hope. Each morning, he would rise with the sun, casting his nets into the waters his ancestors had fished for generations. But his mind was not always with the fish. He dreamed of cities, of poems, of love. One day, while fishing by the sacred Ugem River, he heard laughter, a sound like wind chimes on a breezy afternoon. Curiosity led him upstream, where he found her. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Dressed in a simple blue wrapper, her feet dipped into the water, she laughed as dragonflies danced above her. But there was something regal in her posture, something graceful in her movements. Her name was Adaeze. And unbeknownst to Obinna, Adaeze was not just any girl. She was the only daughter of His Royal Highness Igwe Nnamdi of the Kingdom of Amuneke. They met again. And again. Adaeze kept her identity hidden, claiming to be a servant of the palace who escaped for moments of peace. Obinna never questioned her. Their bond grew like vines over time, quietly, steadily, until it could no longer be ignored. Under the canopy of fig trees, they would talk for hours. Obinna taught her how to bait a hook and paddle a canoe. Adaeze told him tales of cities she longed to visit and poems she wrote in secret. The world melted away in those stolen moments. Then came the first kiss, under the rain, both of them drenched, her hands on his face, his trembling with disbelief. A love had blossomed between a commoner and a princess, delicate and defiant. Obinna was invited by Adaeze to the grand masquerade festival, where villagers and royals alike would gather in celebration. She gave him a mask, instructing him to wear it and blend in. That night, music thundered like the skies, drums echoing across the valley. Obinna saw Adaeze dressed in gold and red, her identity now clear before him. But even through the shock, his love did not waver. They danced amidst the crowd, masked and free, until the final drumbeat. Then her mask fell, and so did his. Their eyes met, and so did the Igwe's. A silence cut through the night. Guards rushed forward. Obinna was dragged to the palace dungeons. Adaeze screamed his name, tears spilling from her eyes. The dungeon was cold, damp, and unforgiving. Obinna was accused of treason, for defiling royal blood, for daring to love above his station. Days turned to weeks. Torture, both physical and emotional, wore at his soul. Adaeze, meanwhile, fought her own war. Her father forbade her from speaking his name, demanded she marry the son of a neighboring king to secure an alliance. But her heart rebelled. She wrote letters to Obinna, smuggled by a kind-hearted servant, each word soaked in sorrow and strength. Obinna, they may cage you, but they cannot cage our love, she wrote. Wait for me. Obinna sat on the damp, stone floor of the royal dungeon, the icy chains biting into his wrists like cruel fangs. The only sound was the occasional drip of water from the moss-covered ceiling and the scurrying of rats that had become his nightly companions. His clothes, once simple yet clean, now clung to him like a second skin, torn, filthy, and soaked from the river of time and sorrow that seemed endless. 3 days had passed since his arrest, though in truth, it felt like a lifetime. 3 days since the masquerade festival, since his identity was unmasked, since the love of his life had cried out his name in front of the entire kingdom. 3 days since the chains had clamped shut around his wrists and shattered the illusion that love could bridge any gap. But even now, even in this suffocating darkness, Obinna's thoughts were not of anger or regret. They were of her. Adaeze. Her voice rang in his ears like a lullaby. Her laughter still shimmered behind his closed eyelids, more vivid than the torchlight that rarely pierced this place. Her lips, soft and trembling, pressed against his in that rain-drenched kiss. It was the memory he clung to when the nights grew cold and his body ached. On the 4th day, the guards came. 2 of them, both wearing the ceremonial red and gold of the royal palace, their faces stern as stone, dragged Obinna from his corner. His legs, weak and trembling, barely supported him as they pulled him into the grand chamber of judgment. There, sitting upon a high-carved ivory throne, was Igwe, king of Amaneki. His crown, carved from the tusks of the kingdom's ancestral elephants, glistened beneath the torches, but his eyes burned with fury. "You," the king said, voice thunderous, "a low-born fisherman's son. You dare touch the bloodline of our ancestors? You dare defile a princess?" Obinna said nothing. The elders, seated on wooden stools in a semicircle, murmured and shook their heads. The high priest, his white-chalked face ghostly in the firelight, whispered incantations of purification under his breath. "You will be punished," the king continued, "publicly. You will be made an example. This land has laws. This land has honor. You," he pointed a trembling, furious finger, "are a stain on our heritage." At last, Obinna spoke. Voice hoarse, body broken. "But is love also a crime, my king?" The room fell silent. The crackle of the flames seemed to pause. Obinna straightened as much as his bruised body would allow. "I did not sneak into the palace to steal your daughter. I did not cast spells or whisper lies. I loved her. I still do. She came to the river as herself. She laughed like a girl, not a princess. She dreamed like any woman might. And I loved her not for her crown, but for her heart." The Igwe's eyes widened. His lips quivered, but he said no more. Obinna was dragged back into the darkness. But this time, a spark had been lit. In her royal chambers, Adaeze sat beneath the beaded curtain, her fingers clenching the handkerchief Obinna once used to dry her feet after she slipped into the river. Every inch of her palace shimmered in gold and silk, yet nothing compared to the way her heart ached with every breath. She had tried to see him. Twice. Denied. She had pleaded with her mother, the queen, whose face was lined with pain. "My daughter, if you truly love him, you must forget him. It is not your destiny." "But Mama," she whispered through tears, "what is destiny if it denies the heart?" The queen had no answer. Adaeze stood before the elders the next day, her voice firm, her posture regal. "You say I was born to lead. But how can I lead if I'm a prisoner of tradition? If my love is seen as filth, then perhaps the crown is not as noble as it claims to be." The council erupted in shock. Her father nearly collapsed from fury. She was banished to her chamber. A guard posted at the door. But even that could not extinguish her fire. With the help of her handmaiden, Chinyere, Adaeze sent him the first letter. Folded into the hem of the bread she begged the cook to send to the dungeons, Obinna found her words, written in hurried ink. "My dearest Obinna, they chain you because they fear what they do not understand. But I do. I see you. I feel you in the silence of my room, in the wind that enters my windows, in the tears that fall before sleep takes me. Hold on. For me. For us. Your Adaeze." That night, Obinna cried. For the first time since his arrest. He whispered her name into the void. And somewhere, miles above the dungeon floor, she whispered his back. Weeks passed. Then a month. His sentence had not yet been passed, a sign that the royal family was divided. Some elders believed in swift execution. Others feared rebellion from the villagers who had begun whispering about the love that defied kings. The youth of the kingdom began wearing blue cloths, a color associated with the Ujum River, the lovers' meeting place. Adaeze began planting a seed. Quietly, carefully. She spoke to her old tutor, a scholar with a long memory and a tender heart. She begged Chinyere to reach out to her late brother's loyal guards. She even risked speaking to her mother again, asking only that if the time came, she not stop her. You will disgrace this house, the queen whispered. I will save my soul, Adaeze replied. Then came the day the king made his final decree. Obinna was to be executed at dawn, by hanging, before the marketplace. The moon that night was round and sorrowful. The air hung heavy with the scent of rain and destiny. Chinyere came to Obinna's cell dressed as a royal guard. In her hands, keys. He could barely believe it. Where is Adaeze? He whispered. Waiting. The tunnel was old, hidden beneath the palace floor, once used by queens fleeing invaders centuries ago. Now it was used for love. At the riverbank, Adaeze stood, hair loose, eyes wide with tears. She held out her hand. Obinna stumbled into her arms. They held each other like two halves of one broken soul, finally stitched together by desperation and devotion. They crossed the river, boarded a cart smuggled by her tutor, and vanished into the night. The wheels of the cart rattled over the cracked, winding roads, each creak a hymn of hope. Obinna and Adaeze huddled beneath the tattered cloth covering their escape cart, their fingers entwined like vines that refused to be separated by the storm. The journey to Lagos was long, treacherous, and uncertain, but every mile between them and the palace was a breath of freedom. Adaeze, still adorned with traces of royalty, gold earrings, a beaded bracelet gifted by her late grandmother, looked into Obinna's eyes. In them, she saw exhaustion, yes, but also love, resilience, and a depth of gratitude that words could not hold. I would choose you again, she whispered, pressing her lips to his bruised knuckles. Even if it meant losing everything. Obinna, with tears threatening to spill, held her tighter. You are everything I never knew I deserved. Lagos, with its towering buildings, restless spirit, and ocean breeze, welcomed them not with comfort, but with indifference. Here, no one cared who was a princess or a fisherman's son. It was a city where survival was the throne and street wisdom the crown. They rented a tiny room in Mushin, damp, hot, but theirs. The ceiling leaked when it rained. The window looked onto a mechanic's yard. Still, it was a palace in their eyes. Obinna found work at the mechanic's shop, repairing engines and tires from dawn to dusk. His hands, once skilled at weaving fishing nets, now learned to fix broken machines. Adaeze, despite her refined upbringing, took a job as a nursery assistant at a small school run by a widowed woman named Mama Neka. She swept classrooms, taught rhymes, and told stories to children who clung to her like kittens. At night, they returned to their single mattress, lit candles when power failed, and whispered dreams into each other's ears. They were poor. But they were rich in the one thing no one could take: love. But the past does not rest easily. News reached them through hushed phone calls and secret letters smuggled by Chinyere, who remained in Amaneki. The kingdom was divided. Some celebrated Adaeze's defiance, seeing her as a symbol of liberation. Others cursed her name, calling her selfish and ungrateful. The king, Igwe, had fallen gravely ill. Rumors swirled that he had lost the will to rule. And there were worse rumors, one of vengeance. A wealthy neighboring prince, jilted by Adeeze's refusal to marry him, vowed revenge. With political ties and soldiers loyal to him, he sought to destroy Obinna, physically, socially, completely. One rainy night, Obinna was attacked while walking home from work. 3 men in black masks beat him to the ground with iron rods. He awoke in the hospital, ribs cracked, lips torn, eyes swollen shut. Adeeze wept beside him. "It's me they want," she whispered. "This pain. It's because of me." "No," Obinna rasped. "They hate what we stand for. But I will not regret a second of this life with you. Not even in pain." One night, their apartment caught fire. A surge from a faulty wire sparked flames that devoured their mattress, their clothes, Adeeze's last silk wrapper from the palace. Everything was gone in minutes. They stood outside in the dark, rain soaking their skin, ash in their throats. Strangers offered them blankets. A woman from the next building gave Adeeze dry slippers. But something broke in her that night. She fell to her knees in the mud, screaming at the heavens. "What more do you want from us? We ran. We gave up everything. We love each other. What more?" Obinna knelt beside her. He held her face in his bruised hands and whispered, "Let them burn our home. But they can never touch our hearts. We can rebuild. We still have us." She wept into his chest. And that night, beneath the broken sky, she prayed, not as a princess, but as a woman in love. "God, if this love is wrong, then make me stone. But if it is right, let it rise again like the sun." With help from Mama Neka, they found another small room. And something miraculous happened. A donor, a woman from the UK who heard of Adeeze's story from a viral social media post by a former student, offered funds to open a proper school in Ajagunal, a place for children of the poor, the forgotten, and the voiceless. Adeeze named it the River School, after the Ujum River where she first met Obinna. Obinna, though unlettered, built benches, fixed the generator, and became a mentor to the older boys. He told them stories, not just of fish and rivers, but of courage, sacrifice, and how love demands endurance. They weren't just rebuilding their lives. They were building hope for others. One morning, years after they fled, Chinya arrived at their door, older, but her eyes still bright with loyalty. She knelt before Adeeze and whispered, "Your father is dying." Adeeze froze. "He asks for you," Chinya said, her voice breaking. "He says he dreams of Obinna's eyes, of what he did to you both. He wants to see you, to say, sorry." For the first time in years, Adeeze's lips trembled with uncertainty. "What if he hasn't changed?" she asked Obinna that night. Obinna gently kissed her forehead. "Then we go not for him, but for us. To close the circle. To end the story they tried to bury." The kingdom had changed. New murals painted on walls showed a princess with braided hair and a fisherman with a staff, holding hands by the river. Young women wore blue cloth in silent tribute. Songs were sung of the girl who followed her heart, and the boy who taught her to fly. Obinna and Adeeze walked through the palace gates as equals. The guards bowed. In the palace chambers, the Igwe lay frail in bed, his face sunken, his crown resting beside him like an artifact of another age. When Adeeze entered, he cried. "My daughter," he whispered, "forgive the man who loved tradition more than his child." Obinna stepped forward. And in an act that silenced the entire court, he knelt beside the king, not in submission, but in honor. "I loved her before I knew she was a princess," he said. And I love her still, now that she is so much more. The Igwe placed his trembling hand over theirs. Then take care of her. And this kingdom. If not with a crown, then with your heart. The sky above Amaneki wept gently the morning after the reconciliation, as though the heavens themselves mourned the years of pain and separation. Obinna stood in the royal courtyard, eyes closed, face turned skyward, letting the rain baptize him anew, washing away the years of injustice, fear, and exile. Inside the palace, Adaeze stood beside her father's bed, holding his frail hand. Igwe Nnamdi, once feared and revered, was now a shadow of his former self. Yet his eyes held clarity, a light kindled by repentance. I thought strength was in laws, Adaeze, he murmured. But you showed me that real strength is in the heart. Adaeze wiped her tears silently and smiled. My strength is Obinna, she whispered. He is the river that carved through stone. The news of their return spread like wildfire. Villagers poured into the streets. Some knelt. Some wept. Some danced. For years they had heard whispers of the lovers who defied royalty, of the princess who chose love over privilege. But to see them, standing hand in hand at the palace gates, Obinna in a simple linen tunic, Adaeze draped in indigo and silver, her natural hair crowned with gold-threaded braids, was to witness legend walking. Elders who once scorned Obinna now bowed. Not because he was royal, but because he was loved. Deeply. Fearlessly. Publicly. Yet with fame came unrest. The old power structure, rooted in tradition and bloodline, began to tremble. Several noble families grew jealous. They whispered about a commoner ruling through the princess. They sowed seeds of rebellion. One evening, while Obinna addressed a gathering of young men, teaching them to build, to repair, to dream, a voice in the crowd shouted, "He is not one of us. He did not suffer our yams and yolks. He was a fisherman's son, now he dines in the palace." There was murmuring. Obinna raised a hand, calm but firm. "I am not your king," he said, "and I never asked to be. But I know hunger. I know the weight of chains. And I know what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. Not for crowns. For love. For justice. For all of us." A silence followed. Then applause. Then cheers. Then chants. "Obinna! Obinna! Obinna!" Weeks passed. The kingdom slowly began to transform. Adaeze opened a village academy, inspired by the one in Lagos. Girls who once thought their worth lay in marriage or beauty now learned science, mathematics, and leadership. Boys studied literature, farming, and history. Obinna rebuilt the river docks with the fishermen. He formed a brotherhood among the youth, mentoring them not just in trade but in values, patience, resilience, compassion. Soon, the kingdom wasn't led by titles. It was led by example. A royal funeral and a people's rebirth. When Igwe Nnamdi passed away peacefully in his sleep, all of Amaneki came to mourn. The burial lasted 5 days. People sang ballads, not only of the king, but of the daughter who forgave, and the son-in-law who healed. At the end of the ceremony, the chief elder turned to Adaeze. "The crown must rest on a head that has known pain, hope, and sacrifice," he said. "Princess Adaeze, the throne is yours." Gasps filled the air. She stood, radiant, strong. "I will accept. But only if I rule not as one above, but as one among." She turned to Obinna, whose eyes welled with pride. "And I will rule with him, though he has no crown, because he has a king's heart." A year later, the wedding was held. Not in the palace, but by the banks of the Ujum River. Beneath a canopy of silk and woven palm fronds, villagers, nobles, children, and travelers watched the ceremony that united love and legacy. The river sang beside them. Drummers beat rhythms of joy. Birds flew in spirals above their heads. Adaeze wore a gown of white and sky blue, embroidered with the image of a rising sun and flowing river. Obinna wore a wrapper and coral beads, but also the bracelet she once gave him, the one he kept even in the dungeon. When she reached him, he whispered, "I would wait in that prison again, 1,000 times, just to have this moment." And she replied, "You're not the boy I fell in love with by the river." Obinna paused. "No. You're the man I'll love beside it forever." They kissed, and the cheers rose like a tidal wave. Over the years, their love became more than legend. It became policy. Under Adaeze's rule, caste divisions were abolished. Interclass marriages became normalized. A bridge was built over the Ujum River, a symbol of unity. It was named Obinna's Bridge. The once small school grew into a university. The hospital was expanded. Festivals were celebrated in honor of the day the princess chose her heart. Children told stories of the crownless king who fixed broken carts and the river queen who read to orphans in the palace garden. And on quiet nights, after council meetings, laughter, and lullabies, Obinna and Adaeze would sit by the river. He would play a tune on his hand-carved flute. She would hum along, resting her head on his shoulder. No crowns. No titles. Just two hearts that weathered the storm. Together.